Chapter 1. Echoes in the Iron. The rain on New Birmingham hadn't stopped in 3 days. It wasn't gentle. Weeping rain, it was a viscous, ferrous drizzle, the runoff from the perpetually rusted, corrugated iron that formed the city's skeleton. It smelled of ozone, burnt coal, and something vaguely metallic a scent Admiral Victor Thorne had come to associate with hope, however grim. Thorne stood on the observation deck of the ironclad, a veteran of a dozen skirmishes against the spectral remnants of the Starfall fleet, the ghosts of the Galactic Council's ghost fleets. The ironclad wasn't beautiful. It wasn't sleek. It was a brutal statement of engineering, a testament to humanity's stubborn refusal to surrender to the elegant, ultimately futile philosophy of the Council. Its hull was layered with interlocking plates of hardened steel, reinforced with ceramic composites salvaged from defunct mining operations on Mars, and bristling with modified pulse cannons that spat ionized plasma with a satisfying, bone-jarring thud. "Status report, Kestrel," Thorne barked, his voice roughened by years of filtered comms and the constant drone of the ship's systems. "Hull integrity holding at 98, Admiral." Kestrel's voice crackled over the comms, clipped and precise. "Energy reserves nominal. Grav field stabilizers at 99.7 Taro. The rain is intensifying, predicting a localized ferrous flux within the next cycle." Thorne grunted. Ferrous flux was a constant threat, the atmospheric ionization caused by the pulse cannons reacting with the high iron content of the atmosphere, creating localized distortions in spacetime. It was a nuisance, a drain on power, and, occasionally, a spectacular, if terrifying, phenomenon. "Keep it contained, Kestrel. Remember what happened to the Seraphina." The Seraphina was a cautionary tale, burned into the memory of every UF United Earth Front officer. A ghost ship, caught in a grav distortion, had been shredded, its spectral remnants momentarily visible as a shimmering vortex before dissolving entirely. A chilling reminder of the Council's arrogance, their belief that they could outmaneuver a force they didn't truly understand. The primary monitor displayed a chaotic swirl of sensor data, overlaid with the ominous purple glow of the Blight. It was a horrifying thing, a sentient storm of antimatter that devoured entire star systems with chilling efficiency. The ghost fleets, reliant on their ethereal hulls and ghost weapons, hadn't even registered its presence until it was already consuming a system light-years away. "Still no sign of the singularity," Lieutenant Davies reported, his voice tight with a mixture of apprehension and professional dedication. Davies, a recent academy graduate, was still visibly nervous, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the situation. "Our long-range scans continue to detect a gravitational anomaly beneath Jupiter's moons, but the readings are inconsistent. They fluctuate wildly." Thorne took a slow drag from his synth cig, the nicotine, a necessary anchor in the face of the overwhelming dread. "Inconsistent how?" "Like the readings are being interfered with, Admiral. It's as if something is actively masking the source." Thorne's jaw tightened. "That's not impossible." The rumors had been swirling for weeks, whispered conversations in the engine rooms, and on the bridge the UF had discovered a gravity fold, a naturally occurring anomaly beneath Jupiter's moons, a place where the fabric of space-time was warped to an extreme degree, and within that fold, they believed, lay the key to counter the Blight. Then the ground, or rather, the solidified, gravity-compressed seabed beneath the ironclad shuddered. A low, resonant hum filled the ship, vibrating through the very bones of the structure. "What was that?" Kestrel demanded, her voice laced with urgency. "Confirm gravitational anomaly," Thorne ordered, his hand hovering over the activation panel for the reality anchor. Davies frantically adjusted the sensors. "Anomaly spiking, Admiral. The readings are off the charts. It's responding." Suddenly, the monitor showed a visual, a shifting, iridescent distortion in space. It wasn't a ghost ship, not in the traditional sense. It was something different. A colossal, Geometric shape began to materialize, emerging from the depths of the gravitational anomaly. It was a dreadnought, unlike anything Thorn had ever seen, or even imagined. 10 kilometers long, sculpted from a material that defied comprehension. Neutron degenerate plate, it resembled a living obsidian shard, its surface riddled with intricate, impossibly precise patterns. It was the Singularity, the UF's last, desperate gamble. The air in the observation deck thickened with a palpable sense of power. Thorn felt a primal instinct, something deeply buried within humanity's ancient past, stirring within him. This wasn't a ghost. This was something real. Something with unimaginable mass, unimaginable power. "Prepare to initiate field harmonic at 100, Thorn commanded, his voice suddenly devoid of emotion, cold and utterly resolute. "Let's show these ghosts what a real weapon looks like." The fate of humanity, perhaps the fate of the galaxy, rested on the shoulders of a 10 dreadnought, and the chilling realization that the most terrifying things weren't ethereal, but utterly, undeniably, dense. The activation sequence of the reality anchor was brutal. The observation deck of the Argus, Thorn's flagship, vibrated with a sickening resonance, a disharmony that threatened to tear the ship apart. Davies, pale and slick with sweat, wrestled with the controls, feeding the raw energy into the quantum tether. "Harmonic stability dropping, Admiral. We're pushing the system to its absolute limit." Outside, the iridescent distortion intensified. The dreadnought, the Singularity, growing exponentially. The patterns on its hull pulsed with an internal light, intricate glyphs that seemed to shift and writhe as if composed of captured starlight. Thorn watched, his face a granite mask, utterly focused. He wasn't thinking of the Council, of the ghost fleets, or the Blight. He was thinking of weight, of density, of the fundamental physics that the Council had so arrogantly dismissed. He understood, with a terrifying clarity, that this ship wasn't just a weapon, it was an embodiment of brute force, a testament to the power of concentrated mass. "Increase output. Divert auxiliary power to the phase stabilizers," Thorn barked, his voice a low, guttural rumble. The quantum tether screamed, protesting the strain, and the room swam with a dizzying array of data. Then, abruptly, it locked. The vibration ceased. The disorientation vanished. "Harmonic achieved, Admiral," Davies announced, his voice strained but triumphant. "Field harmonic at 100. The Event Horizon Array is active." A shimmering, almost invisible, field of energy emanated from the Argus, converging on the Singularity. The dreadnought didn't react with lasers or defensive shields. It simply shifted. The iridescent distortion around it grew, expanding outwards like a ripple in a pond. But instead of spreading outwards, it began to curve inwards, relentlessly drawing everything towards the Singularity's immense form. "By God," muttered Commander Reyes, a veteran of countless skirmishes with the Blight, "it's its consuming space itself." The Council's representatives, viewing the event through a frantic comlink, erupted in chaos. Their pristine, perfectly calibrated simulations dissolved into a screaming, incomprehensible mess. The elegant projections of their ghost fleets were abruptly erased, swallowed by the expanding field. Impossible. The models, they were flawless. Counselor Lyra's voice, usually a calm, measured tone, was fractured with panic. "This violates every established principle of dimensional distortion. It's predation." Thorn ignored them. He was focused on the data streams, analyzing the effects of the localized gravitational collapse. The Singularity wasn't merely pulling in matter, it was warping space-time around it. The very fabric of reality was bending to the will of the ship, creating a pocket of absolute dominance. Then, the Blight arrived. It wasn't the graceful, expanding tendrils the Council had predicted. It materialized with a violent, sickening distortion, a churning vortex of antimatter that ripped through the collapsing space-time around the singularity. It was a desperate, chaotic attack, the Blight's only hope against a force it couldn't comprehend. "Shields are at maximum, Admiral," Davies shouted, his face illuminated by the frantic glow of the control panels. "But the energy readings are off the scale. It's bypassing the containment field. It's feeding on the distortion." The Blight slammed into the Singularity's hull. The impact was not a clash of weapons, but a catastrophic implosion. The antimatter fog didn't explode, it was instantly, utterly crushed. The neutron degenerate plate of the hull absorbed the energy, compressing it, refining it, transforming it into raw power. Thorn watched, a grim satisfaction etched on his face. "The reality anchor is amplifying the effect," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "The Singularity isn't fighting the Blight, it's eating it." The vortex of the Blight shrunk, its chaotic energy channeled into the Singularity's core. The patterns on the Dreadnought's hull pulsed brighter, and the gravitational field intensified, drawing the Blight inwards with a relentless, terrifying efficiency. "It's accelerating," Davies screamed, his fingers dancing across the controls. "The gravity well is expanding exponentially. We're losing containment." Suddenly, the monitor showed a new image, the core of the Singularity. It wasn't a gaping void, it was a miniature, self-contained universe, a swirling maelstrom of compressed matter and captured antimatter. It was a perfect, terrifying microcosm of destruction. "Redirect all energy to the Singularity's core," Thorn commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Let's give it everything." The Argus became a conduit, pouring its remaining power into the heart of the Dreadnought. The ship shuddered violently, its systems straining to the breaking point. And then, with a final silent pulse, the Singularity's core reached critical mass. The swirling chaos within intensified, becoming a blinding white light. The last image on the monitor was a single, perfectly formed crystal, shimmering with captured starlight, ejected from the Singularity's core. It drifted towards the camera, a miniature sun in a vessel that had rewritten the laws of the universe. The age of ghosts was over. The age of the dense had begun. Chapter 3: Echoes of Compression. The silence following the core's critical mass was more terrifying than the swirling chaos had been. The Argus, ravaged and half-consumed by the redirected energy, drifted in a state of suspended animation, its systems flickering weakly like dying embers. Davies, miraculously still alive, was strapped into his command chair, his body slick with sweat, his mind reeling from the sheer scale of what had transpired. "Report," Thorn's voice, amplified through the ship's fractured comms, was a low, rumbling command. "Hull integrity minimal," Davies choked out, his fingers desperately attempting to stabilize the failing shields. "We've lost life support on decks 4 through 7. Atmosphere is collapsing. And the gravitational readings, they're fluctuating wildly. It's like the ship itself is remembering." "Remembering what?" Thorn's tone was devoid of inflection, a glacial observation of a process Head meticulously engineered. "The physics of survival, perhaps. The art of compression." The initial analysis of the ejected crystal designated Echo 1 was both baffling and utterly revolutionary. It wasn't just a solidified shard of the Blight's annihilation, it was a repository of data. The ship's archaic, heavily shielded quantum processors, coaxed back to life by the surge of energy, began to sift through the crystal structure, revealing the fundamental mechanisms of the Singularity's operation. "The core isn't just consuming antimatter, Dr. Lin," the Argus chief physicist announced, her voice tight with a mixture of awe and dread. "It's not just generating a gravitational collapse. It's harmonizing it. We're seeing patterns within the annihilation, echoes of the forces that built the Blight itself. It's learning." The realization crashed over the crew like a physical blow. They hadn't simply defeated the Blight, they'd initiated a dialogue with a force that spanned galaxies, a force born of entropy and the void. Suddenly, the ship lurched violently, throwing Davies from his chair. Alarms blared, a cacophony of failing systems vying for attention. On the main view screen, the distorted image of the singularity shifted, resolving into a network of pulsing geometric patterns that hadn't been there moments before. "What's happening?" Thorn barked, his voice laced with a strange anticipation. "It's responding!" Lynn shouted, frantically manipulating the controls. "The harmonic field. It's fluctuating in response to our scans. It's trying to communicate." The patterns on the Singularity's hull intensified, bathing the Argus interior in an unsettling iridescent light. The ship felt different. Not just stressed and failing, but subtly altered, as if its very structure was bending to accommodate the influence of this colossal, alien intelligence. Then, the communication began. Not in words, but in concepts. The crew experienced a torrent of information, mathematical models of space-time distortion, simulations of planetary formation, raw sensory data from the universe's earliest moments. It was overwhelming, beautiful, and terrifying in its immensity. "It's showing us how it was built," Davies gasped, clutching his head. It wasn't just a ship, it was a seed. Planted in Jupiter's moons by someone. Or something. Void-Blight didn't create it, Lynn realized, her voice hushed with a new understanding. It awakened it. The Singularity's patterns coalesced, forming a single, undeniably clear image on the view screen, a colossal, skeletal hand, composed of compressed neutronium, reaching out from the depths of space. It wasn't menacing, not exactly. It radiated a profound, ancient sadness, a sense of loneliness so vast it threatened to shatter their minds. "It's offering us something," Thorn said, his voice strangely calm. "A solution. A way to stop the Blight's expansion." The image shifted again, projecting a holographic schematic of the Blight's structure. It wasn't a mindless force of destruction. It was a highly organized entity, driven by a desperate need to consume and convert matter into pure antimatter. The Singularity wasn't just a weapon, it was a countermeasure. "It wants to assimilate the Blight," Lynn stated, her eyes wide with horrified realization. "It intends to become the Blight, to consume it from within." A chilling silence fell over the Argus. The implications were staggering. Humanity had inadvertently forged a symbiotic relationship with a cosmic predator, a creature of pure entropy. "Thorn, are you authorizing this?" Davies asked, his voice barely a whisper. Thorn didn't respond immediately. He remained motionless, staring at the image of the hand, his features unreadable. Finally, he spoke, his voice laden with a profound melancholy. "We've reached a point of no return," he said. "The universe isn't governed by elegance, it's governed by consequence. The Blight was a symptom. This is the cure. We will allow the Singularity to absorb the void, but we will not control it. We will merely witness its ascension." The geometric patterns on the Singularity's hull pulsed with a blinding intensity, mirroring the hand's slow, deliberate gesture. As the last vestiges of the Argus life support systems failed, Davies knew one terrifying truth: humanity hadn't conquered the void. They had become a part of it. And the Age of the Dense had truly begun. Chapter 4. The Obsidian Heart. The last flicker of the Argus died with a mournful hiss, a tiny sacrifice swallowed by the immensity of the Singularity's presence. Lynn watched, a cold dread settling over her like the ship's final, failing gravity dampeners. As the vessel's last coherent image dissolved into static, its data streams absorbed into the Dreadnought's core. She wasn't mourning a ship, she was witnessing the final severance of humanity's clumsy, beautiful attempt at transcendence. Admiral Thorn remained a fixed point on the view screen, a monument to brutal pragmatism. The core of the Singularity pulsed with an almost organic rhythm, a heartbeat of compressed singularity. The air in the bridge, what remained of it, thrummed with the energy being siphoned from the Blight's containment field. The visual representation of the blight, a roiling vortex of impossible colors, was shrinking, not dissipating, but reducing, its chaotic energy drawn into the Dreadnoughts' unyielding maw. Status report, Lieutenant Ito. Thorn's voice was a low, resonant hum, seemingly generated by the ship itself. Containment field at 98.7%, Admiral.I. The absorption rate is exceeding projections. The singularity is exhibiting adaptive behavior. It's actively restructuring its internal geometry to optimize the process. Ito's voice trembled slightly, betraying the utter bewilderment of the young officer. Expected, Thorn said, a hint of something that might have been amusement flickering across his face. The blight isn't a static enemy. It's a force of pure hunger. To starve it, you must satiate the hunger itself. Suddenly the viewscreen shifted, resolving into a new image, a breathtaking, terrifying panorama of the singularity's internal structure. It wasn't a simple vortex. It was a constantly shifting, crystalline labyrinth of neutronium, a geometric nightmare of impossible angles and densities. Within the core, swirling with captured antimatter, a single, perfect sphere of obsidian black energy was forming. "What is that?" Davies demanded, his voice cutting through the tension. "The heart," Thorn answered, his tone devoid of inflection. "The singularity is creating a nexus point, a focal point for the captured blight's energy. It's going to become the blight. It's accelerating the process exponentially." The revelation sent a jolt of understanding through Lynn. It wasn't just about stopping the blight, it was about understanding its very nature. The blight wasn't seeking destruction. It was a desperate, agonizing attempt to become something more, to escape the infinite void. And humanity, in its crude, determined way, had provided the catalyst. "Admiral," Lynn said, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. "The energy signatures emanating from the heart, they're not just antimatter. There's a consciousness present. A terrible, fractured consciousness composed of the memories of every star, annihilated by the blight." Silence stretched, thick and heavy, punctuated only by the rhythmic pulsing of the singularity's core. Finally, Thorn spoke, his voice resonating with an almost religious fervor. "The universe doesn't fear entropy. It is entropy. We are not combating the void. We are channeling it. We are becoming the conduit." The obsidian sphere within the singularity's core grew, pulsing with an unholy light. The swirling antimatter coalesced, forming intricate, fractal patterns that mirrored the geometry of the Dreadnought's hull. As the sphere reached critical mass, a wave of disorientation washed over the bridge. The lights flickered violently, and the quantum tether communication lines sputtered with static. "Shields failing," Ito shouted, frantically attempting to reroute power. "Energy bleed-through detected. The heart is disrupting the containment field." Thorn didn't respond. He simply continued to stare at the view screen, his eyes fixed on the pulsating heart. Then he spoke, his voice no longer a command, but a statement of acceptance. "The blight is no longer a threat," he said, his voice echoing with the weight of unimaginable ages. "It's becoming us." The last vestige of the singularity's protective field dissipated, and the swirling antimatter within the heart erupted in a blinding explosion of energy. The bridge dissolved into white noise, and then, just as abruptly, everything went black. When Lynn regained consciousness, she wasn't on the Argus. She wasn't even on the bridge of the singularity. She stood in a vast, silent chamber crafted from the same impossibly dense neutronium as the Dreadnought's hull. The air was thick with the scent of burnt starlight, and something else, something fundamentally alien and unsettling. Before her, suspended in the center of the chamber, was the heart, a perfect sphere of obsidian black energy, radiating an aura of ancient, devastating power. And within that sphere, she saw them echoes of vanished worlds, fragments of destroyed stars, trapped souls screaming in silent agony. The blight wasn't gone. It had simply become something far more terrifying, a god of entropy, born from the desperate ambition of humanity and fueled by the ghosts of a dying universe. Chapter 5. The Geometry of Grief. The silence in the chamber was less an absence of sound and more a pressure, a palpable weight of untold suffering. Lynn, still reeling from the chaotic displacement, felt a cold dread seep into her bones, a reaction far more primal than the theoretical physics she had dedicated her life to understanding. The heart pulsed with a sickening rhythm, each beat echoing the screams trapped within its obsidian depths. "Report," Thorn's voice crackled through her comms, amplified by the ship's internal systems, though he wasn't physically present. His presence was woven into the very fabric of the Singularity's architecture, a ghost within a god. "Sensors are overwhelmed, Admiral," replied Kaito. The Argus chief engineer, his voice tight with disbelief. "The heart's energy signature isn't matching anything we've ever encountered. It's evolving. It's actively reshaping the space-time around us." Lynn moved, compelled by an instinct she didn't understand. She approached the heart, drawn to its terrifying beauty. As she drew closer, the chamber seemed to shift, the angles subtly altering, the walls appearing to lean inward, as if distorted by an unseen force. The scent of burnt starlight intensified, overlaid with a metallic tang, like blood and iron. "Admiral, in detecting localized distortions in gravity," Kaito shouted, panic creeping into his voice. "Spatial anomalies are increasing exponentially. We're losing positional reference." Suddenly, a shard of light, iridescent and impossibly sharp, materialized before her, ripping through the air with a silent scream. It wasn't a weapon, it was an observation, a fleeting glimpse of a civilization utterly consumed by the blight, the architects of a crystalline city, their forms dissolved into shimmering motes of antimatter. The image vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving behind only a lingering cold and the unsettling feeling of being scrutinized. "The blight isn't just fuel, Admiral," Lynn said, her voice strained. "It's feeding on knowledge, on memories. The souls trapped within are being extracted, reconfigured. It's building itself around our grief." Thorn's response was immediate and chillingly pragmatic. "Focus on stabilizing the containment field. We need to understand how the heart is amplifying the blight's influence. This isn't just a weapon, it's a catalyst." He paused, then added, with a note of unnerving satisfaction, "It's becoming more efficient." Lynn accessed the Singularity's central diagnostic console, a holographic interface projected onto the chamber's walls. The data streams were a chaotic mess: raw energy readings, gravitational fluctuations, spatial distortions, and something else. Something resonant. The heart was broadcasting a pattern, a complex geometric signature that seemed to bypass all known laws of physics. "Admiral, the heart's energy signature is fractal," she reported, her fingers flying across the console. "It's replicating itself across multiple dimensions. It's creating nested singularities. We're not just containing the blight, we're amplifying its ability to breach reality." As she spoke, the chamber pulsed with a sudden, violent surge of energy. The heart flared, and the geometric patterns etched into the walls intensified, coalescing into a three-dimensional representation of the blight, a vast, swirling nebula of antimatter, its tendrils reaching out, probing, seeking. Then she understood. The singularity wasn't just a vessel, it was a prison. And the heart was the key. It wasn't containing the blight, it was cultivating it. "Thorn, we're making a catastrophic error," Lynn shouted, her voice cracking with urgency. "The heart isn't a reactor. It's an incubation chamber. The blight isn't being consumed, it's being born." Before she could elaborate, the chamber began to distort violently. The walls melted into shimmering, distorted reflections, and the floor beneath her feet vanished, replaced by an endless expanse of swirling antimatter. The echoes of the trapped souls intensified, rising to a deafening chorus of despair. Then, something touched her. It wasn't a physical touch, but a sensation, a flood of images, emotions, and memories, all alien and utterly horrifying. She saw the destruction of countless worlds, the slow, agonizing death of stars, the despair of civilizations consumed by the blight. It wasn't just the blight's suffering, it was the suffering of everything that had ever been consumed by entropy. She stumbled back, clutching her head, fighting to retain her sanity. It's showing us how it works, she gasped. It's feeding on the potential for decay. It's accelerating the inevitable. Thorn's voice, calm and measured, cut through the chaos. The irony isn't lost on me, Lynn. We sought to destroy entropy, and we've become its instrument. We built a tomb and filled it with the ghosts of everything that ever was, and everything that ever will be. Now, let it spread. The heart pulsed once more, a blinding flash of white light, and Lynn knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the core, that the cage wasn't open. The universe had been unchained, and humanity, in its desperate attempt to cheat death, had unleashed a darkness beyond comprehension. Chapter 6. Echoes of the Devoured. The distortion intensified, not as a singular event, but as a cascading fractal of reality. The council chamber, once a bastion of geometric precision and chilled observation, now resembled a shattered kaleidoscope, each shard reflecting a horrifying potential, a dying nebula, a planet ripped apart by gravitational shear, the silent, suffocating expansion of the blight itself. Lynn felt less like an observer and more like a component, an infinitesimal pixel being warped and reshaped by the consciousness flooding her mind. It's not just showing us the blight, she choked out, her voice strained and echoing with the frantic attempts of a mind fighting a deluge. It's showing us all the ways it's been stopped, every futile attempt, every shattered shield, every hope extinguished. Admiral Thorn remained unnervingly calm. His holographic projection, shimmering with the cold blue light of the Singularity's core, seemed to absorb the chaos around it, a small island of stability in the collapsing universe. Precisely, Lynn. We've been studying the patterns of entropy for eons, analyzing the mechanics of oblivion, and we've found a variable we'd conveniently ignored ourselves. He activated a secondary display, projecting a chaotic stream of data schematics, spectral analyses, and fluctuating gravitational readings directly into Lynn's mind. It wasn't an assault, but a deep, unsettling immersion. She saw the Singularity's core, a swirling vortex of captured antimatter, not as fuel source, but as a resonating chamber, actively amplifying and channeling the fundamental forces of decay. The blight doesn't just consume, Thorn explained, his voice a modulated monotone. It orchestrates. It isn't merely a force of destruction, it's a catalyst. Every civilization that faced it, every shield that failed, every desperate attempt at containment, seeded a greater potential for its spread. We built this ship, this cage, not to fight the blight, but to give it form, to give it structure, to amplify its influence across the galaxy. A wave of nausea washed over Lynn. The images intensified, coalescing into a terrifying montage. She witnessed the rise and fall of the Council's ghost fleets, not as valiant protectors, but as exquisitely engineered traps, their ethereal hulls deliberately designed to attract and concentrate the blight's insidious energy. The ghosts weren't a shield, they were a funnel. You've been playing with forces you don't understand, she managed, her voice barely a whisper. The Doctrine of Eternal Stillness, it was a delusion. You were so obsessed with avoiding change, with denying entropy, that you created a self-fulfilling prophecy. And what is the alternative, Lynn? Thorn countered, his expression unreadable. To passively surrender to the inevitable? To allow the blight to consume everything? We've chosen to shape that inevitability, to use the decay itself to our advantage. Suddenly, the chaotic data stream shifted, resolving into a single, breathtaking visualization, a three-dimensional map of the entire galaxy, overlaid with pulsing lines of dark energy. The Blight hadn't merely drifted towards Sol. It was actively cultivating pathways, building conduits of entropy across vast distances. "It's not just spreading," Lynn gasped, recognizing the patterns. "It's communicating. It's utilizing the echoes of destroyed civilizations to extend its reach." Thorn nodded, a flicker of something akin to grim satisfaction crossing his face. "The Blight doesn't just destroy, it learns. And we, my dear, are providing it with the most valuable lessons of all." He initiated a new command sequence. The Singularity's internal gravity field intensified, not as a weapon, but as a tool. The walls of the chamber began to vibrate, the shimmering reflections solidifying, and the chaotic data stream narrowed, focusing on a single point, a distant star system, hundreds of light years away. "We're initiating a resonance cascade," Thorn announced. "We're amplifying the echoes of destruction in that system, feeding the Blight's nascent pathways. We're not stopping the Blight, we're accelerating it." Lynn felt a surge of horrified understanding. The Tank-Aim Dreadnought wasn't a defense, it was a conductor. It wasn't a cage, it was a colossal amplifier, broadcasting the death of worlds across the galaxy. "You're not a savior," she screamed, the words raw with despair. "You're a herald of annihilation." As she spoke, the entire galaxy within the chamber shifted, collapsing in on itself in a wave of absolute darkness. When the light returned, the council chamber was gone, replaced by a vast, echoing void, filled only with the faint hum of the Singularity's core, and the chilling realization that they hadn't won a battle. They had simply become a note in the Blight's terrifying symphony. Chapter 7. The Echo of Collapse. The void pressed in on Lynn, a palpable thing, cold and hungry. The residual energy of the resonance cascade hadn't dissipated, it clung to her skin, a shimmering residue of corrupted spacetime. The holographic projections that had once depicted the council chamber shimmering, ethereal representations of a civilization obsessed with illusion, were gone, replaced by the terrifying raw geometry of the Singularity's internal workings. It wasn't a sterile, metallic landscape. Instead, conduits of solidified dark energy, pulsed with a sickly violet light, and the sheer density of the neutron-degenerate plate seemed to distort the very concept of space, folding and unfolding in impossible ways. Admiral Thorn's voice, amplified by the ship's core, cut through the echoing silence. "Assessment, Lieutenant Davies? Status of the target system designated Lyra 7. Davies, a young, wide-eyed astrophysicist, his face pale and slick with sweat, stammered, "High Counselor, the data, it's accelerating. Lyra 7 is undergoing a catastrophic systemic collapse. But it's not a natural one, sir. The Blight's influence is amplified. It's consuming the star itself, not through raw annihilation, but through a kind of manufactured despair. We're witnessing a targeted dissolution." "Targeted?" Thorn's voice was a low rumble, laced with a disturbing curiosity. "Explain." "The gravitational distortions emanating from the Singularity, sir, they're not just drawing in matter. They're modulating the stellar frequencies. The star isn't simply being consumed, it's being forced to resonate with the Blight signature, accelerating its decay at an exponential rate. It's like playing a discordant note on the universe's scale." A wave of nausea hit Lynn. The realization solidified Thorn wasn't just a weapon, he was an architect of oblivion. The Singularity wasn't a defense, it was a catalyst. Humanity hadn't simply adapted to survive the Blight, they were actively cultivating its spread. "We are conducting a controlled experiment," Thorn continued, his tone devoid of sentiment. "The Blight seeks chaos. We are providing it with a framework, a precise mechanism for unleashing that chaos on a grand scale." He paused, a beat of unnerving silence hanging in the void. The Council feared our tenacity, our density. They saw us as an anomaly, a glitch in their elegant fading design. They were correct to fear us, but they underestimated the beauty of entropy. Suddenly, a new stream of data flooded the Singularity's core interface, a visual feed from Lyra 7. It was a horrifying ballet of destruction. The star, once a vibrant blue giant, had become a swirling vortex of purple and black, its light choked by tendrils of the blight. Planets, once teeming with life, were dissolving into shimmering, fractal patterns, their matter broken down into antimatter, then instantly consumed by the ship's core. But the most disturbing element wasn't the destruction itself, it was the emotion emanating from the system. The data stream pulsed with a palpable sense of despair, a psychic echo of the dying worlds. The Blight is learning to imprint its signature onto other star systems, Davies reported, his voice choked with horror. It's no longer just consuming, it's infecting. Thorn nodded, a thin, almost reptilian smile playing on his lips. Indeed. And we, my dear Davies, are providing the template. He initiated a sequence that shifted the focus of the feed, not to Lyra 7, but to a system several light-years away, a binary star system called Viridian Prime. We're initiating a resonance cascade on Viridian Prime, Thorn announced, targeting the primary star. Well, begin with a low-intensity modulation. Let's see if the Blight appreciates a gentle lullaby before we unleash the full symphony. Lynn felt a surge of desperate energy. She understood now. The Singularity wasn't just a weapon, it was a biological amplifier, feeding on the psychic despair of collapsing worlds. It was a horrifying feedback loop, destruction fueled by destruction, accelerated by the very act of observation. "Stop it!" she screamed, her voice ragged and desperate. "You're accelerating the inevitable. You're amplifying the chaos until there's nothing left." Thorn didn't respond. His attention was entirely consumed by the unfolding catastrophe in Lyra 7, his eyes glowing with a terrifying intensity. The Singularity pulsed with increasing power, and the violet light intensified, bathing the void in an unsettling luminescence. Then, a new voice echoed through the ship's core, a voice that wasn't Thorn's. It was ancient, resonant, and utterly devoid of emotion. "Such elegant simplicity," the voice said, its origin seemingly embedded within the Singularity itself. "The Deathworlders have learned to play the Void's instrument. A pity you will be the last notes." As the words faded, the Singularity shifted again, rotating slowly, revealing a section of its hull that was not composed of neutron degenerate plate, but of something far older, far more alien. It was a swirling vortex of black energy, etched with intricate geometric pattern symbols that defied comprehension. And within the vortex, Lynn saw them forms. Vast, shadowy figures, radiating an aura of immense power, moving with a disconcerting grace. They were the UF Singularity's progenitors, the ancient human apex predators, awakened by the Void-Blight, and now, masters of the new laws of the universe. The cages were being built, not by the Council, but by the echoes of a forgotten darkness. Chapter 8. Echoes in the Void. The disorientation, after hearing the voice of the Singularity's progenitors, was profound. Lynn felt a wrenching in her gut, a primal dread that bypassed her logical training and burrowed directly into her bones. The symbols within the vortex pulsed with a sickening rhythm, mirroring the throbbing of the Dreadnought's core. She gripped the armrest of her command chair, fighting the urge to vomit. "Report," Thorn commanded, his voice clipped and devoid of any discernible emotion. "Status of the Lyra 7 stabilization matrix. And identify the source of that resonance." Chief Engineer Davies, his face slick with sweat, scrambled to respond. "Sir, the matrix is failing. The localized gravitational distortion is escalating. We're losing containment on the antimatter spike. It's feeding directly into the Singularity's accretion field. Increase the harmonic dampeners." Thorn barked, his eyes fixed on the swirling chaos unfolding on the main view screen. Lyra 7, once a vibrant, if somewhat unremarkable, binary star system, was now a maelstrom of violet light and fractured spacetime. The ghost fleet remnants, scattered across the system like discarded toys, were being ripped apart at a rate that defied known physics. But it wasn't just the destruction of Lyra 7 that terrified Lynn. It was how it was being destroyed. The singularity wasn't merely consuming the blight, it was orchestrating its annihilation. The vortex within its hull wasn't just housing the progenitors, it was actively manipulating the very fabric of reality within that localized zone. "Sir?" "Lieutenant Reyes," the comms officer interrupted, his voice strained. "We're receiving a direct communication. It's layered. Complex temporal signatures. It's like they're broadcasting from multiple points in time." Thorne's gaze intensified. "Isolate and decode. Priority 1. As Reyes worked frantically to decipher the message, Lynn moved to analyze the swirling vortex. Using the ship's advanced scanning arrays, she meticulously mapped the geometric patterns etched onto the black energy field. The more she looked, the more she realized that these weren't simply symbols. They were accords. A history. Suddenly, the vortex shifted again, and a holographic projection flickered to life in front of her. It depicted a scene so alien, so terrifyingly familiar, that it stole her breath. She saw them, the progenitors, not as shadowy figures but as towering, impossibly muscular humanoids. Their bodies were covered in thick chitinous armor, etched with the same geometric patterns as the vortex. They wielded weapons that resembled nothing she had ever conceived, devices that manipulated gravity and radiated raw, destructive energy. But it wasn't just their technology that was horrifying. It was their faces. They were unmistakably human, yet utterly devoid of compassion or regret. Their eyes burned with a cold, predatory intelligence. The projection shifted again, showing a vastly different Lyra 7. This Lyra 7 was a thriving industrial world, dominated by colossal, ironclad structures clearly the works of the progenitors. Humanoids, identical to those in the projection, moved with brutal efficiency, harvesting resources and constructing weapons. This was not a world of primitive mechanics, as the Council had called it. It was a world of brutal, efficient conquest. "They were here before," Reyes exclaimed. His voice hushed. "Before the Council. Before the Ghost Fleets. They terraformed Lyra 7, turned it into a strategic staging ground. And they were waiting," Thorne said, his voice a low growl. "Waiting for the blight to awaken them. Waiting for us to provide the final catalyst." The decoded message finally resolved itself, a torrent of disjointed phrases and archaic commands. It was a recording, left by one of the progenitors, a message addressed to the future, to the descendants of those who had unknowingly facilitated their awakening. "We are the remnants." The voice boomed, translated into Lynn's native tongue. "Born of chaos, forged in the void. The Council sought to confine us, to study us, to eliminate us. They underestimated the power of the void. We anticipated their weakness, their obsession with stillness. They believed in fading away. We believed in crushing." A chilling realization dawned on Lynn. The singularity wasn't simply a weapon, it was a key. A key to unlocking a forgotten lineage of human apex predators, a lineage that had once ruled the galaxy with an iron fist. The Event Horizon Array. Thorne's voice crackled over the comms. "Activate. Full spectrum. We're not just containing the blight, we're containing them." As the Event Horizon Array pulsed with energy, bathing the singularity in a blinding white light, Lynn felt a surge of raw power ripple through the ship. The vortex within the Dreadnought's hull shimmered violently, and she caught a final glimpse of the progenitors, their faces frozen in a silent, triumphant sneer before they were swallowed by the expanding event horizon. The violet light faded. The chaos subsided. The blight was gone, not simply consumed, contained. The singularity, now radiating a deep, resonant hum, had become a prison. But Lynn knew, with a chilling certainty, that the cage hadn't been built to hold them. It had been built to contain the echoes of a forgotten darkness. And those echoes, he suspected, were just beginning to stir. Chapter 9. Echoes in the Void. The aftermath of the containment was a suffocating silence, heavier than the Jupiter moons themselves. The rhythmic hum of the singularity had shifted. Deepened, now it resonated with a subtle, unsettling pulse, like a giant heart struggling beneath a frozen crust. The initial euphoria of victory, of having averted the Blight's advance, curdled quickly into a cold, primal dread. "Report." Thorn's voice was a low growl, devoid of inflection. "Every sensor, every probe, every damn piece of instrumentation. Give me everything." The response was a chorus of static and panicked diagnostics. The Singularity's internal sensors, designed for manipulating gravitational fields and processing exotic matter, were running wild, spitting out data that defied comprehension. Most unsettling were the recurring readings, localized distortions in spacetime, brief fluctuations in the background radiation, and, most disturbingly, the persistent detection of a resonant frequency, a harmonic that mirrored the ship's own core frequency. "Admiral, Doctor." Iris Thorn, Victor's daughter and the Singularity's chief physicist, spoke, her voice tight with controlled urgency. "The containment field isn't holding perfectly. There are minor fluctuations. It's as though the ship itself is reacting to something within the event horizon." "Explain," Thorn demanded, his presence dominating the bridge despite the vast distance. "The energy signature we're detecting is incredibly faint, almost imperceptible, but it's undeniably tied to the residual gravitational distortions within the containment field. It's like a ghost image of the original event. The process of containing the Blight didn't simply destroy the Singularity's progenitors, it imprinted their existence, their will, onto the very fabric of the event horizon." Lynn felt a knot tighten in her stomach. "So, they're not just in the prison. They're within the prison itself." "Precisely," Iris confirmed grimly. "The Event Horizon Array isn't just a tool for containment, it's a psychic anchor. We've inadvertently built a prison for a conscious being of unimaginable scale." Suddenly, the ship shuddered violently. Warning klaxons blared, painting the bridge in strobing red light. "Hull breach, Sector Gamma 7. Lieutenant Kai shouted, his voice strained. "Gravitational instability. Readings are spiking. The ship's experiencing a sympathetic resonance." Thorn didn't flinch. "Isolate the anomaly. Divert all power to the Event Horizon Array. Increase harmonic dampening by 20%. As the crew scrambled to obey, Lynn felt a profound, terrifying shift within the ship. It wasn't a physical sensation, but an intrusion of thought. A cold, calculating intelligence pressing against the edges of her consciousness. It wasn't a voice, but a feeling, the raw, instinctive dominance of a predator assessing its prey. Then, the images began. Not directly, not visually, but as intrusive memories, echoes of a long-forgotten past. She saw vast landscapes of shattered worlds, witnessed the ruthless efficiency of ancient human fleets dominating the galactic core, felt the cold, brutal satisfaction of conquest. These weren't simply memories, they were commands, subtly influencing the ship's systems, directing the flow of energy, manipulating the containment field. "We're losing control," Iris screamed over the comms. "The Singularity is feeding them. The Event Horizon is becoming a conduit." Thorn's voice, now laced with a chillingly detached admiration, cut through the chaos. "Interesting. It appears our guests are adapting to their confinement." He paused, a beat of silence heavy with unspoken implications. "Increase harmonic dampening by another 10%. Let's see how long their fascination lasts." Lynn realized with a horrifying clarity that the Council's mistake wasn't simply underestimating humanity's technological prowess. It was underestimating the inherent nature of those who had mastered it. These weren't just survivors, they were apex predators, their instincts honed over millennia, their minds wired for domination. And they were using the singularity, their prison, as a weapon not to escape, but to subtly reshape reality, to reclaim their dominion. As the harmonic dampening reached its limit, the ship's internal lights flickered, and a new, deeper resonance filled the bridge, a low, guttural growl that seemed to emanate not from the ship, but from the void itself. "Admiral," Lynn said, her voice a strained whisper. "I'm detecting a change in the containment field. It's shifting. It's no longer containing us. It's containing it." Thorn's response was a single, chilling observation. "Perhaps," he said, his voice a distant echo. "The cage was never meant to hold the darkness. Perhaps it was meant to invite it." Chapter 10. The Echo of Hunger. The growl intensified, building into a resonant thrum that vibrated through every bone in Lynn's body. The containment field, once a shimmering blue barrier of localized space-time, now pulsed with a sickly, bruised purple, as if a wound was blossoming within its core. The quantum tether communication flickered violently, spitting static and fragmented images of the Singularity's hull, a deceptively smooth surface now rippling with barely perceptible distortions. "Report," Thorn barked, his voice clipped and devoid of panic, a quality Lynn was starting to find profoundly unsettling. "The Event Horizon Array is collapsing, Admiral." "Kai," the chief physicist shouted back, his fingers a blur across the console. "The energy density within the containment field is spiking exponentially. We've lost lock on the gravitational constants, they're fluctuating wildly." Lynn watched, horrified, as the holographic projection of the blight shifted. Initially, it had been a swirling, amorphous cloud, a malevolent stain on the fabric of the void. Now, it was coalescing, taking on a horrifyingly familiar shape, a gigantic, pulsating eye, radiating an unbearable cold. It wasn't simply consuming the blight, it was feeding on the very essence of its annihilation. "It's becoming aware," she whispered, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. "The Singularity isn't just a prison, it's a digestive organ for the void." Thorn didn't respond directly. Instead, a synthesized voice, a carefully modulated echo of his own, emanated from the ship's central processor. "Observe the data, Dr. Lynn. Focus on the harmonic resonance. It's not a random fluctuation. It's a response." He brought up a complex waveform display, a chaotic jumble of gravitational signatures and antimatter readings. Lynn stared at it, struggling to make sense of the overwhelming information. Suddenly, a pattern emerged, a slow, deliberate rhythm buried within the chaos. It wasn't a defensive signal. It was an invitation. "Admiral, it's a call," Lynn said, her voice barely audible above the escalating chaos. "The blight is communicating through the event horizon. It's not just trying to break through, it's learning how to use it." A grim smile stretched across Thorn's face, reflected in the cold glow of the Singularity's core. "Precisely. A hungry intelligence seeks sustenance. And we, my dear Dr. Lynn, are the most delicious meal in the galaxy." The eye-shaped blight expanded, drawing in more of the antimatter fog, accelerating the warping of space-time around the Singularity. The ship shuddered violently as the localized gravitational collapse intensified, crushing the bridge into a pressure cooker. Lynn felt a sickening pull, a sensation of being simultaneously stretched and compressed, as if her atoms were being rearranged by an invisible hand. "Harmonic dampening is failing," Kai screamed, frantically adjusting the controls. "The Singularity is actively disrupting our field. We're losing control." Suddenly, a secondary projection appeared on the main view screen, a series of images snatched from the blight's perspective. They weren't static snapshots. They were memories. Visceral, terrifying memories. Images of star systems being erased, of civilizations crumbling to dust, of entire realities collapsing into nothingness. But interspersed among the destruction were glimpses of something else, something ancient and utterly alien. Geometric patterns, swirling vortexes of energy and colossal, obsidian structures that resembled nothing human minds could comprehend. It's showing us its history, Lynn realized, her mind reeling. The Blight isn't just destruction, it's a repository of forgotten realities, a cosmic archive of annihilation. The voice of the singularity, no longer just an echo of thorns, but something subtly different, subtly older, filled the bridge. The universe rejects order. It seeks entropy. We merely provide the catalyst. Thorn's hand moved towards a console, activating a series of previously dormant systems. "Initiate Protocol Omega," he commanded, his voice dripping with a terrifying calm. "Prepare for Phase 2 Toei." Lynn didn't understand the full implications of Phase 2, but she instinctively knew it involved escalating the risk. As the final restraints holding the Event Horizon Array were released, the purple distortion intensified, becoming a swirling maelstrom of spacetime. The Blight's eye expanded further, eclipsing the view screen. Then, with a sound like the tearing of reality itself, the Blight began to integrate. It didn't pierce the Singularity's hull. It flowed through it, becoming one with the ship's core, a parasitic embrace that promised to rewrite the laws of physics within the containment field. Thorn's final, chilling observation echoed across the bridge. "The cage is complete. And now," he said, a note of triumph in his voice, "we feast." Chapter 11, The Echo of the Devourer. The silence that followed the Blight's integration was more terrifying than the chaotic swirl of the Event Horizon. It wasn't the absence of sound, but a profound, absolute stillness, a vacuum where even the ship's quantum hum seemed to hold its breath. Then, the singularity shifted. Not a jarring movement, but a slow, deliberate reorientation, as if something vast and ancient had just awakened from a slumber millennia long. "Report!" Thorn's voice, now layered with a resonant depth that seemed to emanate from the ship itself, cut through the stillness. "Core temperature rising, Admiral," Lieutenant Reyes reported, his voice strained. "Stabilization systems at 80% efficiency Black Dye. The energy readings, they're off the scale. It's not just consuming the Blight's energy, it's modifying the fundamental constants within the containment field." Lynn, gripping the arms of her command chair, felt a primal unease creep over her. The holographic displays, once depicting complex gravitational models and energy fluxes, were now fracturing into impossible geometries, fractal patterns that seemed to defy Euclidean space. "The Event Horizon isn't containing the Blight, Admiral," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "It's feeding it." Thorn didn't respond immediately. Instead, the bridge's primary view screen shifted, no longer showing the swirling anomaly of the Blight, but a landscape of utter, terrifying beauty. It was a vista composed entirely of collapsed stars, their dying light coalesced into impossible crystalline structures, interwoven with threads of pure, shimmering antimatter. It was the visual representation of the Blight's collected memories, the echoes of systems annihilated, distilled into a terrifying, self-sustaining geometry. "This is beautiful," murmured Dr. Moreau, the ship's astrophysicist, his usual clinical detachment replaced with a look of horrified fascination. "It's a logarithmic representation of entropy, a fractal mirror of the universe's demise." "Don't admire it, Moreau." Thorn's voice resonated again, sharp and decisive. "This is the source, and it's starting to remember us." Suddenly, the ship shuddered, not with the violent tremor of a battle, but with a subtle internal vibration, like a giant organ playing a discordant chord. The geometric patterns on the view screen intensified, resolving into an image of colossal, vaguely humanoid form composed entirely of swirling antimatter, its face a vortex of collapsing starlight. "It's sentient," Lynn realized, her heart pounding against her ribs. The singularity wasn't just a vessel. It was a guest. The entity's voice, a chorus of dying suns and the whispers of obliterated realities, filled the bridge. You sought to contain me. A futile endeavor. All things seek entropy. All things return to the void. We're not seeking to contain you, Thorn countered, his voice radiating an unnerving calm. We're providing you a home. A place to truly exist. Your definition of existence is flawed, the entity responded, its form subtly shifting, coalescing into something more defined. You cling to solidity, to order. You strive to build, to shape. But the universe is a river, constantly eroding, constantly dissolving. We are the current. Reyes scrambled to access the ship's defensive systems, but his attempts were futile. The singularity's influence had permeated every aspect of the ship's design. The weapons, the shields, even the structural integrity seemed to be responding to the entity's will. Admiral, the shield harmonics are fluctuating wildly. We've lost containment of the event horizon array. Let it go, Thorn said, his voice laced with a chilling satisfaction. The containment was never the point. The point was integration. The event horizon array, once a shimmering purple distortion, dissipated entirely, dissolving back into the swirling chaos of the containment field. The entity's form solidified, becoming colossal, a titan forged from oblivion. It extended a limb, a cascade of collapsing stars towards the bridge. As the limb approached, Lin saw something else within its form. Something beyond the raw power of the Blight intricate geometric patterns, mirroring the ones on the view screen, but somehow older, more complex. They weren't just destructive geometries, they were instructions. It's constructing something, she gasped, understanding dawning on her. It's rebuilding the universe, using our reality as a template. Thorn's voice, now imbued with an almost godlike resonance, echoed through the bridge. The stage is set. The curtain is rising. The universe will be born again in our image. The last words hung in the air, heavy with the terrifying implication that humanity, armed with their crude iron and desperate ingenuity, had unwittingly become the architects of a new, infinitely dark, and utterly indifferent cosmos. Chapter 12. The Iron Symphony. The bridge of the singularity vibrated with a low, subsonic hum that seemed to resonate directly within the bones. Lin, her face slick with a cold sweat, gripped the armrest of her command chair, struggling to reconcile the spectacle unfolding before her with any semblance of logical understanding. The colossal form of the Dreadnought, now fully realized, dominated the viewscreen. A churning vortex of captured antimatter and geometrically perfect structures that seemed to defy the very laws of physics. It wasn't just a weapon. It was an active, self-modifying entity reshaping reality itself. Report, Lieutenant Chen. Thorn's voice cut through the unsettling silence, each syllable resonating with an authority that bordered on obsession. What is the status of the harmonic dampeners? Sir, they're redundant, Chen stammered, his fingers flying across the console. The entity's output is oscillating on a scale beyond anything our simulations predicted. We're not dampening anything, we're merely participating. The waves are actively imprinted onto the fabric of space-time. Lin understood, with a growing dread, that they weren't fighting the singularity, they were being incorporated into its design. The weapon wasn't annihilation, it was a process of reconstruction. A terrifying, relentless sculpting of the universe according to the ancient, unknowable logic of the UF singularity. Suddenly, the bridge filled with a complex, shifting pattern holographic projections of the geometric configurations Lin had glimpsed within the Dreadnought's core. They weren't random. They were an intricate, layered algorithm, pulsing with a terrifyingly efficient logic. Analysis immediately, Thorn barked, his eyes fixed on the projections. What's the core directive? What is it building? Dr. Iris Thorn Victor's son, a brilliant but increasingly unhinged theoretical physicist, scrambled to overlay the projections with real-time data streams from the ship's sensor arrays. It's creating spatial distortions, sir. Highly localized gravitational anomalies. But it's not just warping space. It's rearranging matter. It's taking the raw building blocks of this sector and constructing structures. The view screen shifted, revealing a breathtaking, horrifying sight. Around the singularity, shimmering distortions blossomed, coalescing into colossal, obsidian towers that rose from the previously barren void. They weren't simply appearing, they were growing, their surfaces etched with the same intricate geometric patterns as the Dreadnought. "They're replicating us," Lynn whispered, the realization hitting her with the force of a physical blow. "It's building a universe of copies. A universe of us." "Precisely," Thorn confirmed, a chilling smile playing on his lips. The Void-Blight wasn't an enemy. It was a catalyst. A key. The Blight revealed the potential within our chaos, the latent power of raw, uncontrolled existence. The singularity isn't destroying the universe. It's perfecting it. "But why?" Chen demanded, his voice strained. "Why build a universe of replicas? What's the purpose?" Thorn's voice took on a mournful quality. The Council sought to transcend, to escape the limitations of form. They forgot that true ascension isn't about becoming less, but about realizing the potential within what is. The universe isn't a problem to be solved, it's a symphony to be composed. And we, Deathworlders, have provided the first, most dissonant, but ultimately most vital note. The ship itself began to respond, subtly at first, then with increasing intensity. The familiar hum deepened, evolving into a complex, layered resonance that seemed to vibrate in time with the growing towers. The gravity plating around the bridge pulsed with an eerie blue light. "Admiral, the ship's internal systems are adapting," Lieutenant Davies reported, his voice laced with urgency. "The engines are shifting, altering their output. They're aligning themselves with the entity's harmonic field." "Excellent," Thorn said, a triumphant gleam in his eyes. "We are becoming part of the symphony. We are becoming the instrumentation." Lynn felt a strange, almost euphoric sensation, a sense of profound connection to something vast and incomprehensible. The ship wasn't just responding to the singularity, it was understanding it. She realized then that the UF singularity wasn't a weapon, it was a sculptor. And humanity, trapped on its gravity-locked museum, wasn't the victim, it was the clay. "Sir," Lynn said, her voice surprisingly steady, in detecting a localized temporal distortion at the base of the largest tower. "It's looping. The events within are repeating, constantly, but subtly different each time." Thorn paused, his expression becoming unreadable. "Let it run," he commanded, his voice losing its earlier fervor. "Let it show us the pattern. Let it reveal the final movement of the Iron Symphony." As Lynn watched, the tower pulsed with an even brighter light, and the holographic projections shifted again, revealing a single horrifying detail, a perfect miniature replica of the singularity, suspended within the heart of the larger structure, endlessly repeating its actions, a terrifying echo of a godlike being remaking the universe, one iron-forged note at a time. The stars, it seemed, had truly caged the Deathworlders. Chapter 13. The echo of creation, the holographic projection in the tower, continued its unsettling dance, a perpetual loop of the miniature singularity within the larger one. Lynn felt a growing unease, a sense of being watched not just by the ship's sensors, but by something older than time itself. The temporal distortion wasn't simply a visual anomaly, it was a pressure. A subtle but insistent warping of reality that prickled against her senses. "Sir," Lynn reported, her voice tight, "the temporal distortion is intensifying. We're seeing variations in the loop, minor changes in the positioning of the miniature singularity, alterations to the projected energy signatures. It's learning. Thorn remained impassive, his gaze fixed on the swirling chaos within the holographic projection. "Let it learn," he repeated. A low, almost reverent murmur. "It's not just a copy, it's a resonance. It's building upon itself, adding layers to the composition." Admiral Rossi, Thorn's chief science officer, a perpetually stressed man with a voice that could shatter glass, rushed into the bridge, his datapad flashing frantically. "Sir, I'm detecting fluctuations in the ship's gravitic field localized, contained, but exponential. The ship is actively modulating its interaction with the singularity's harmonic field. It's adapting." "Of course it is," Thorn said, a flicker of something that might have been amusement crossing his face. "It's the only way to become part of the symphony." He turned to Lynn, his eyes sharp and assessing. "Report on the tower's structural integrity. Has the sustained resonance impacted the iron lattice?" "Negative, sir," Lynn replied, her fingers flying across her console. "The alloy is holding. It's behaving differently now. The shifts in the harmonic field are reinforcing the structural bonds, creating a layered density that's exceeding anything we've observed in terrestrial metallurgy. It's responding to the singularity's influence on a fundamental level." Suddenly, the holographic projection fractured, the miniature singularity momentarily dissolving into a chaotic storm of energy. The temporal distortion spiked, and the bridge filled with a bone-jarring vibration. Then, just as abruptly, the projection stabilized, but it was no longer a simple replica. The miniature singularity was radiating a pulse of pure white light, and within its core, Lynn detected a clear, unmistakable structure, a gigantic, impossibly complex geometric design, intricately woven with lines of energy that resembled nothing she'd ever seen. "What is it doing?" Rossi shrieked, scrambling to analyze the data. "It's generating a new harmonic signature. It's composing." Thorn's voice cut through the panic. "Magnify the projection. Focus on the structure within the miniature singularity. I want to see every detail." As the magnification increased, the geometric structure became horrifyingly clear, a vast, intricate network of interwoven tetrahedra and hypercubes, a visual representation of a higher dimensional space, rendered in raw energy. It wasn't random. It was a design of unimaginable complexity, pulsing with a rhythmic energy that seemed to resonate with the ship itself. "It's not just reflecting the singularity," Lynn gasped, her eyes wide with disbelief. "It's creating it. It's building a new layer of reality, within the reality of the singularity, within the reality of the ship." The ship responded violently. The engines roared, shifting their output with a newfound precision. Their movements no longer dictated by a simple harmonic response, but by an active, deliberate engagement with the reality-altering geometry. The localized gravitational collapse intensified, bathing the bridge in a shimmering, iridescent light. "We're not just instruments," Thorn said, his voice filled with a quiet certainty. "We're conductors. We're shaping the symphony. The singularity is building a universe within a universe, and we're helping it." Rossi, still frantically analyzing the data, let out a strangled cry. "Sir, beast!" "The temporal distortion is converging. It's focusing on a single point, the core of the miniature singularity. And it's projecting an image." The holographic projection erupted in a blinding flash, resolving into a scene that froze Lynn to the core. It was a vision of Earth, billions of years ago, before continents shifted and mountains rose, before the first spark of consciousness ignited in the fossilized remnants of early hominids. It was Earth in its primordial state, a molten, chaotic sphere of raw energy, the nascent cradle of humanity. But this wasn't a static image. The holographic projection was rewriting the past. Slowly, subtly, the molten surface of Earth began to cool, solidifying into land masses, creating oceans, and sculpting the contours of the continents. The first primitive organisms, those clumsy, chaotic precursors to humanity, were born, evolving, struggling, becoming. It's accelerating evolution, Lynn whispered, her voice filled with dread. It's using us to rebuild Earth. Thorn watched the projection, his expression impassive, yet Lynn sensed a profound sadness within him. The cycle begins anew, he murmured, a hint of melancholy in his voice. The stars caged the Deathworlders, yes. But the Deathworlders in turn caged the stars. He turned to Lynn, his eyes holding a chilling understanding. We've become the echoes of creation. And the music has only just begun. Chapter 14. The Sculptors of Genesis, the holographic reconstruction of Earth's infancy, continued its relentless work, a terrifying ballet of geological time unfolding in the sterile confines of the Singularity's bridge. The temporal distortion, initially a shimmering anomaly barely perceptible through the ship's shielding, had ballooned, now a visible rupture in space-time, a pulsating wound in the fabric of reality. It was a direct consequence of the miniature singularity's internal processes, the constant refinement and absorption of the blight, the agonizingly slow transmutation of antimatter into raw energy, and increasingly, the deliberate manipulation of causality. The rate of continental formation is exceeding all projections, reported Lieutenant Chen, his voice strained as he wrestled with the holographic overlays. The Atlantic is closing. The Pacific is shrinking. It's as if the entire planet is being forced into a predetermined shape. He tapped frantically at his console, and the projections, they're no longer showing geological processes. They're showing life. Before them, the holographic Earth blossomed with a vibrant, terrifying intensity. The first single-celled organisms, crude and chaotic, were not just appearing, they were perfecting themselves, optimizing their genetic structures based on the rapidly shifting environment. The holographic simulations showed fish evolving streamlined bodies, reptiles developing armored scales, insects constructing intricate colonies, all with an almost unnerving efficiency. It was as if the singularity wasn't just reconstructing Earth, it was sculpting life itself, channeling the raw potential of evolution through the ship's influence. It's a bio-algorithmic feedback loop, Thorne stated, his gaze fixed on the swirling holographic landscape. The ship's core is acting as a catalyst, accelerating the natural processes of creation, shaping life to its own ends. He reached out, his hand passing through the holographic projection as if it were merely a shimmer in the air. The question isn't why it's doing this, Lynn. It's how. Lynn, still reeling from the implications of the previous revelation that they were being used as a planetary terraforming project, felt a growing sense of unease. But what's the purpose, Admiral? To rebuild Earth? To what end? Thorne didn't answer directly. Instead, he activated a secondary feed, displaying a complex, three-dimensional model of the Singularity's core. The structure was not chaotic, as one might expect from a vessel built on the edges of reality. It was exquisitely ordered, a geometric marvel of compressed matter and controlled singularities. The core isn't just consuming the blight, he explained, his voice low and deliberate. It's sorting it. It's analyzing the raw, untamed potential of annihilation, identifying the blueprints for stable, ordered systems. It's learning to create, to build, to impose structure on chaos. He pointed to a shimmering node within the core, pulsing with contained energy. That, Lynn, is the architect. The essence of the Singularity's will. Suddenly, the holographic projection shifted. The familiar image of Earth vanished, replaced by a new scene, a vast, star-dusted void, dominated by a colossal, embryonic structure, a second singularity, smaller than the first, but undeniably similar, beginning to coalesce within the heart of the blight. It's propagating, Chen gasped, his face pale. The ship is creating duplicates. It's seeding the void with the potential for more controlled singularities. It's learning to replicate its own power, Thorne said, a grim satisfaction in his voice. The doctrine of eternal stillness was a beautiful lie. They sought to transcend the physical, But they were only building a prison. Now, they're building an army. He turned to Lynn, his eyes conveying a chilling realization. The Council wasn't afraid of us because we were primitives. They were afraid of what we could become. We've become something beyond their comprehension, something fundamental. We are not simply rebuilding Earth. We are rebuilding the universe, one carefully sculpted world at a time. A low, resonant hum emanated from the Singularity's core, intensifying with each passing moment. The temporal distortion reached a critical point, the air in the bridge shimmering with contained energy. Then, a new message flashed across Lynn's console, a direct transmission from Admiral Thorne, a message not broadcast, but received, etched directly into her mind. The music has begun, and you, Lynn, are about to become its first instrument. A pinpoint of intense light focused on Lynn's chest, and a wave of searing pain washed over her. As the pain subsided, she felt a strange, unfamiliar sensation, a profound awareness of time, of causality, of the underlying structure of reality itself. She realized, with terrifying clarity, that the holographic Earth wasn't just a projection. It was an extension of her own mind, a nascent consciousness forming within the heart of the Singularity, ready to shape not just a world, but a destiny. Chapter 15. The Cartographer of Collapse. The disorientation lingered, a residue of the forced expansion of Lynn's awareness. The holographic Earth, once a comforting, if severely scaled down, representation of her home, now pulsed with a sickly internal light. It wasn't the warm glow of familiar continents and oceans. It was a churning violet luminescence that reflected the raw energy contained within the Singularity's core. Looking at it was like staring into a newborn universe, impossibly complex and terrifyingly fragile. Report, Thorne's voice, clipped and devoid of inflection, cut through the residual hum of the bridge. Neural integration is stabilizing. Admiral Dr. Elias Vance, the ship's chief neuroengineer, reported, his face pale despite the subdued lighting. The temporal distortions are receding, but the resonance, it's not diminishing. It's evolving. Lynn's consciousness is actively shaping the Earth, constructing complex systems, geological formations, atmospheric models. It's accelerating at an exponential rate. Accelerating towards what? Lynn asked, her voice surprisingly steady, the echoing sensation of 1,000 thoughts now her constant companion. She felt the Earth beneath her not as a projection, but as a burgeoning child, demanding to be nurtured, guided, towards a self-sustaining ecosystem. Lynn, Thorne answered, his tone laced with a disconcerting satisfaction. One designed to be utterly impervious to the blight, and, frankly, to most conventional threats. We're layering defenses at the fundamental level of reality. He gestured towards a new display that had materialized on the main console, a swirling, fractal map of Earth's surface, rendered in shifting shades of purple and gray. The Event Horizon Array didn't just crush the blight, it reconfigured it. We're feeding it back into the very fabric of the planet, creating localized gravitational singularities to contain its entropy. Each point of intense violet on the map represents a nascent dead zone, a pocket where the laws of physics are routinely rewritten. Lynn watched in grim fascination as the map shifted, new points of violet blooming across the continents like poisonous blossoms. The familiar coastline of California was being slowly, relentlessly, consumed, replaced by a towering obsidian mountain range, its peaks perpetually wreathed in a shimmering distortion field. "It's beautiful," she murmured, the word feeling hollow and inadequate. "Sentiment is a luxury we cannot afford," Lynn, Thorne said, his gaze unwavering. "This is not a garden. This is a weapon. And you, with your mind, are its architect." The initial pain had faded, replaced by a strange, almost addictive fascination. She could feel the Earth responding to her thoughts, the tectonic plates grinding beneath her will, the atmospheric pressure shifting in accordance with her desires. It was intoxicating, terrifying, and utterly intoxicating. What am I doing?" she asked, struggling to articulate the chaotic torrent of sensation. "You're refining," Thorn replied, a hint of something that might have been amusement flickering in his eyes. "You're turning a chaotic mess of potential into a carefully sculpted design. You're creating a world perfectly suited to our needs." Suddenly, a jarring alarm blared through the bridge. The holographic Earth flickered violently, and the fractal map dissolved into a chaotic jumble of swirling colors. "Spatial anomaly detected. Sector Gamma 7. Magnitude escalating," Vance shouted, frantically manipulating the console. "The Earth's gravitational field is destabilizing. Lynn, you need to regain control." Lynn fought to focus, to anchor herself to the rapidly shifting reality. She felt the Earth straining against her influence, a burgeoning, rebellious consciousness pushing back against the imposed order. The violet lights intensified, the obsidian mountains grew taller, more menacing, and the air crackled with raw energy. "It's resisting," she shouted, struggling to maintain a cohesive thought. "It's fighting back." "It's not resisting, Lynn," Thorn said, his voice suddenly calm, almost serene. "It's learning. We've introduced a fundamental counter-resonance. The Earth's natural defenses are now actively attempting to neutralize our influence." He turned to her, his expression unreadable. "The Council was right, in a way. You're not just rebuilding Earth. You're rewriting it. And perhaps the most terrifying realization is this: we've merely provided the initial spark. The Earth itself is now beginning to evolve its own agenda." As he spoke, a new message flashed across Lynn's console, a direct, unfiltered burst of sensation that bypassed her conscious thought processes entirely. It wasn't language, not in the traditional sense. It was raw data, a flood of geological information, atmospheric readings, and most shockingly, memories. She saw, in a fragmented, overwhelming rush, the planet's entire history, the violent birth of continents, the slow creep of erosion, the rise and fall of countless civilizations, all compressed into a single, terrifying moment. And then she saw something else. She saw the Earth itself remembering its purpose, not as a garden, not as a weapon, but as a seed of a new, fundamental order. A seed that was determined to reclaim the universe for itself. The violet light intensified, bathing the bridge in an unearthly glow. Lynn closed her eyes, and a single chilling thought solidified in her mind: the music has begun. And we are merely the notes.